May 14th, 1787, the Constitutional Convention opens in Philadelphia, and James Madison wins first place for his Sailor Moon costume. Welcome to The Revisionists, the only podcast that remembers the War of 1812. I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
And our guest tonight is one of Denver's favorite comedians and one of my favorite comedians in Denver, Timmi Lasley.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and for sitting through that very wordy introduction.
I liked it. You said basically the flip side of my favorite coin. So both of the sides of my favorite coin.
The self-esteem coin. It's always on heads.
I like how you've now elected to make the introduction, which you already famously cannot deliver, slightly more complicated by forcing a joke into it.
Oh, no. I
liked the joke. I had to look up when the War of 1812 happened the other day. So I was like, hey, I remember it. But, you know, it's good to be on a podcast that remembers it too.
Not
That is the official slogan, I think, of the War of 1812.
Once it hit 1813, it was just like, not for 1812 anymore. Yeah. Brutality.
War of 1812, exactly what it sounds like.
Well, if you're not familiar with the show, each episode we take a different topic from history. One host presents a true story. One host comes up with an alternate. And the winning story becomes our accepted history going forward. And last week we discussed Thomas Jefferson.
I thought you were going to say Thomas last name withheld.
Thomas last name withheld.
Protecting his identity.
To protect him, of course. No one would know who he was, because he's not carved into a mountain, certainly. The alternate history one, which established that Thomas Jefferson, all of his accomplishments were probably done by John Adams.
Yeah.
Well, they went through various body switching
schemes. Yeah.
A face-off, a Freaky Friday.
A classic, the switch up, urinating into the same fountain.
Yep, the same magic fountain.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
You can't just pee into a common gutter fountain with someone
Audience,
and switch
don't
body.
Just go to random fountains about town and pee into them.
That's not magic.
Yeah. Otherwise, all the friends would have switched bodies at the beginning of every single episode during that opening credit sequence.
That would have been, I would have loved Friends so much more if that were.
I've always assumed they were peeing during that.
I mean, they only show them from the waist up, I think.
Well, they're wet anyway. Like, you can't tell. That's the beauty of a fountain.
But have you ever, worn a wetsuit and peed in it out of the water? Like, if you're not completely submerged in water, people could still see what you're doing.
Well, this is a valuable life lesson that I've been taught.
That was spoken from experience.
Yeah, they would all have to be sitting in the fountain, which then you know exactly what everyone's doing. Did it just get a few degrees warmer in here?
It was just like all of them sitting in the fountain, just kind of
one shot,
not just looking at each other.
The last shot of the credit sequence where the music takes a hard cut,
and it's just the sound of pissing. Gross.
Not one of Simon and Garfunkel's best songs.
A new Zen koan.
Well, this week we're continuing our discussion of the American Revolution with the father of our country, George Washington.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll be doing the actual history. Timmy, you'll be doing the alternate.
Yeah.
So, if we're all ready, I'll lead off. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732, but by the British calendar, which was in use at the time, he was born on February 11th, 1731. Because fuck historians, that's a solid Protestant date, I guess. They don't use those Pope calendars.
Yeah, and people say, why can't we switch to the metric system? You know, it was easy enough back then to just switch up everyeverybody's birthdays.
True. If we split
the difference,
switching
my weight or height.
George Washington and I have the same birthday.
If you... I mean,
why not? While we're making up stuff, why not?
Yeah, dates don't matter. That's the whole point of this show.
Touché. You have the same birthday as George Washington.
Sure.
Congratulations.
Canon.
You're basically the same age.
Work that into your alternate history, too.
Done.
His father was Augustine Washington, and his mother was Mary Ball Washington. He had 6 siblings who survived into adulthood out of 9, which is insane for the 1730s.
They're a hardy stock.
That's like 10 kids when adjusted for inflation, I feel like.
Sure.
His father died when George was 11, so he was...
Kids nowadays, they'd get a medal just for not dying under the age of 6. We coddle them too much. Alive at 25. What an accomplishment.
So reference to a anti-drinking and driving program?
Is it drinking and driving or just reckless driving? I'm not sure.
I mean, I feel like drinking and driving is reckless driving.
Well,
It's one of the most reckless forms, right underneath putting on makeup and blowjobs,
okay.
highway blowjobs.
Yeah.
Those are two more reckless forms, in my opinion,
that
my
thing
humble opinion.
where you sit in the back seat
drinking
and you stick your feet up to the front seat and try to drive with your feet.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's so reckless. You bad
Pretty
boy.
reckless.
Although highway blowjobs, more unsafe than side street blowjobs.
Yeah, way more. It's higher speeds.
Neighborhood blowjobs.
Yeah, come on.
I think they just released a study.
Oh,
they
highway
looked at
blowjobs.
Highway blowjobs versus suburban blowjobs.
I just pictured crash test dummies in a car just
and
giving each other
the problem
blowjobs.
with that data, though, if you
75%
look
of
at
people die in blowjob-related accidents within a mile of their home.
Well, I feel like most blowjob-related accidents happen in the home.
The data is it's skewed though in that study. I mean, if you look closely at it, you'll see that there are way fewer suburban blowjobs because you know you're not as likely to be seen on the highway, so the number of blowjobs go up. You know,
you think with the commute from the suburbs that
they didn't have the right controls on their study. You know, I read through it and I wasn't into it.
This is why I'm starting a position to add chastity belts to seat belts to prevent blowjob related injuries that affect us all every single day.
And of course, a tiny airbag that goes off over a penis when someone tries to
Exactly.
perform fellatio on it.
Broken noses, a rash of broken noses break out.
Also, 100% of incidents where the driver is giving the blowjob end in a fatality.
Oh, yeah, 100%. For more information on that, check out my other podcast, Stage of Fools, where that's a thing that happens in the show we watch.
Anyway, he was raised largely by his half-brother Lawrence after his father died, which is a triumph of Nate Balding's colonial redundancy system.
Sure.
Eventually inherited the estates of both Mount Vernon and Ferry Farm, which is...
How come you hear about Mount Vernon?
not,
The Ferry Farm's where I want to spend a Saturday.
How is it spelled?
Ferry with an E, like the boat, not like...
Oh, Ferry Farm.
Not like a live... Not like a role-playing farm.
Now, when you said with an E, my head immediately went to like Faery, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, the
I was
real
thinking,
ones.
like,
That's true.
hardcore fantasy
Yeah,
fan.
like magic
Not
with
this
a
light
K,
shit.
motherfuckers.
That's true. Mount Vernon was for tobacco farming. Ferry Farm was for LARPing.
Yeah.
Basically.
Fairy.
I just pictured any painting of George Washington where he's wearing like plastic fairy wings behind him.
I'm just going to make it...
They don't paint those, but you know.
He went to Hot Topic
That's
just to
where he
get
got
them.
his military prowess, all of his LARPing. He learned all the strats.
It's where you learn true courage, you know.
Great charisma. He contracted smallpox on a trip to Barbados with his brother, which left his face visibly scarred.
Oh, I didn't know that. I heard he was handsome.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I guess back in the
late
day, it was
scars,
like,
hey.
right? Like back in the day, handsome was a different kind of like.
You're handsome if you survived
Spectrum.
smallpox,
He was
I feel
smallpox handsome.
like. He was a smallpox 10,
Yeah.
but a typhoid 6.
Ooh.
It left him scarred, but immune to smallpox. Which again, in the colonial Americas, was like getting the star in Super Mario. I
that
feel
sounds
like is that
the,
shit.
the origin for a supervillain.
Oh yeah, my superpower is I'm immune to smallpox.
Wow.
And if you have a superhero whose superpower is giving people smallpox, then that is their great conflict.
Oh, I would have assumed that the supervillain was spreading smallpox.
Oh, okay. I got those backwards.
So he went down to Barbados to, if I have my history right, his brother Lawrence had gotten tuberculosis. Is that right?
I believe so.
He went to take the cure in Barbados, and then his brother got smallpox,
Yeah.
but survived. So that's
yeah,
cool. All
exactly.
right, cool.
Which is the best spring break ever.
Hard to kill in Washington, apparently.
We'll get to that, actually. Washington was eventually noticed by the militia. This was like his moment of being discovered. He was noticed by the militia commander Robert Dinwiddie, largely because he was 6 feet tall.
And he was LARPing?
Yes, and he was LARPing.
Hey, this is not alternate history yet, all right?
I mean, the rest of America was they were like halflings, basically, if we're going to continue in this vein.
Yeah,
To be 6 feet tall at that point was incredibly rare.
that's true. I'm pretty much 6 feet tall, and I've never been recruited by the military.
That's
Yeah, that's... Well, there's a lot more people in general now, you know? Like, there was only, 100 people back then?
100.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
like-
The Revolutionary War was just 3 dudes.
tough fight.
It lasted. It's amazing that it
As a
lasted for as
percentage
long
of
as
the
it
world
did.
population, though, that was an astounding,
Right.
it's astounding hit.
And also there were a lot more trees back then, so people could hide more easily. 3 people in battle, like, good luck finding them.
Yeah, exactly. The one battle lasted the whole 7 years. But he was the best horseman in Virginia. It said, and he was totally strong. People
Totally
loved that.
strong.
It's around the same time that he also became a Freemason. He was not really that involved with, unless you ask a Freemason, because he's all over that shit. If you had talked to one of them,
And we did establish in a previous episode that Freemasons are combating the evil undergods that controlled the action of the British and French empires.
also an anti-robot society.
Yeah.
Okay, so this you guys are making history with this podcast. You literally changed it to that.
Yeah, that
Yes.
is now
Cool.
canonically true in history.
Anyone who says different is lying to you. Kids, if you write a report and a teacher corrects you on that fact, burn the school down. I am editing that out because that is
Wow.
an incitement to violence.
Wow. I did tell people to drink and drive
Or a Public Enemy
earlier,
song.
so I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Washington becomes involved in the French and Indian War. The Iroquois chief, Toncherison, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, gave Washington the nickname of Town Destroyer. And they were friends. They were on the same side.
Yeah.
Town Destroyer also...
Tencherson, what was it? He was either the Half King?
Half King.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Half King of the Iroquois.
Name of Town
Half
Destroyer.
king, huh?
Yeah,
Interesting
big
you should
ol'...
say that.
Everybody had crazy Game of Thrones names back then.
The Half King. Yeah.
And Town Destroyer,
Yeah.
which is a little bit of a mouthful.
It was also translated as Devourer of Villages,
Yeah.
which is way cooler. A famous incident in the French and Indian War was the Braddock Expedition,
Yes.
where George Washington gave advice to the British commander of this unit to split his forces, and that led to that unit being largely massacred and routed. It speaks to the fact that Washington was kind of a mediocre military strategist,
Yeah.
but
Especially during the 7 Years' War, there was a few notable fuck-ups.
yeah. Well, he was more
But it
young.
was his first war, you know?
Yeah,
Like, I
we all
can't
make
wait till
mistakes.
you get into your first war
Yeah.
to see, how many times you die.
All of his letters to the soldiers' relatives were like, "Hey, you can't cook an omelet without cracking a few eggs.
Yeah.
Sorry about your husband." G-dubs. He was a mediocre strategist, but his real advantage in war was his leadership and his character. In that battle where his troops were massacred, he had 2 horses killed underneath him, and he had 4 bullet holes shot through his coat. But he was still, riding around rallying his men into what was called an orderly retreat. But he did gain leadership skills from this experience. He got insight into the English military and how easily killable they were when you give them shitty advice.
God, just think about how much better a President Trump could be for us, when he wins in November, if he had been able to go to war before running for office,
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, he was in ROTC.
he would be so much more
Or
prepared to take the office when he inevitably does in November.
Sure.
I just, like the idea of him having to fight a war. At least then he'd have a qualification in his bag.
So after the war, he married the wealthy widow, Martha Custis, who was an intelligent manager of the estate at Mount Vernon. He was, because of his earlier bout with smallpox, sterile, and he basically had lost all of his teeth by this point, so he had a different series of disgusting-looking dentures.
Now he's like a smallpox 8 at this point.
Yeah, smallpox 8, unless he has his dentures in, and he also took laudanum, so he's holding.
Sweet.
His interests at the time included cockfighting and backgammon. Now,
So a lot of fun at parties.
exactly. I feel like he's the kind of person who can't stop talking about how great backgammon is, which if you've ever had those people in your life, you know how
I've never met a person who knows how to play backgammon, who like understands the rules even when they read them.
Is that the one with the board with like the long triangles on it? Okay.
I love how you were miming triangles because I wouldn't get it if you didn't.
It's got like the little lanes for the dots.
Oh yeah, sport games. I understand cockfighting way more. That's
cockfighting's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Yeah.
What's a gammon and how do you get it back? Revenge gammon? What is this?
Revenge gammon. Oh, of course, the classic backgammon vendetta. Which sounds like an indie band.
That was actually the real start of the 7 Years' War, the French Indian War, whatever. It's a bad backgammon game. Those backroom backgammon games.
This is, of course, we get to the point where we basically have to discuss this with almost all the founding fathers, except Hamilton, where George Washington kept people enslaved on his estate. And this kind of speaks to a weird element when we're talking about the founding fathers and slavery, where George Washington, over the course of his life, grew into an anti-slavery viewpoint.
Yeah, sort of like Ben Franklin, who did free all of his slaves.
And so did George Washington.
What if it's just that his teeth were racist, and as he lost them...
Oh my god, the racism is falling out of me. Thank God I got rid of that racism.
Probably more like what it is the racism and hypocrisy in his soul made his teeth fall out.
That's true.
He was rotting from the
I like the idea
that racism comes from the teeth. And that's why no hockey players are racist.
Yeah, and that's why everyone in Appalachia is like super tolerant. I found a hole, and it was in your mouth.
Yeah, about 6 years old, you stop being racist, and then it just comes right back.
Comes right back in.
Well, I mean, you get your permanent racist teeth.
Yeah, exactly. Until you're old, and then you're not racist anymore when you're old.
No, this isn't
people
working.
Famously not racist.
I do like the idea of Washington losing all but one of his teeth, which is like the idea of like, you become a more evolved person, but there's still part of you that's like Now, of course, Washington freeing the people he kept enslaved in his will is more than any other founding father did, except Hamilton and Benjamin Franklin.
Who freed them after the war.
And it's still too late. It's good because it's better than, say, Thomas Jefferson did. Mm-hmm. But it's still a black mark on Washington's legacy. Although, it should be pointed out, the majority of the slaves at Mount Vernon were enslaved by Martha Washington because of her previous marriage. And George Washington actually had no legal right to free them. And when George Washington freed his slaves, he did that in the face of opposition from his neighbors and relatives and even his wife.
Yeah.
So credit where credit is due, but grain of salt with that.
It's still not an A+ there, George.
No. I mean, that's the tough thing about history is that you're constantly looking back at the past, judging people of that day by our day's standards, which we should, because we should hold ourselves to a higher standard than they did, because we have come so far. But, so now we have to do even better, and that's how societies evolve and get better. But it is important to remember that if you, I heard Dan Carlin say this once in one of his podcasts, and I think it's so brilliant, but if you were to take a baby from today and time travel back and raise it back then, it would be raised in that culture. Where that is not, so for him to be even,
to support slavery.
Yeah, that child would be raised in that mindset, and it wouldn't seem as awful to him as it does to us today. And so it is pretty great that George Washington had a heart eventually.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, though, there were people who were speaking out against slavery at the time. So it's not like it was a settled matter.
Including people he worked with directly.
Hamilton.
Hamilton and Ben Franklin, after the war, did write a number of essays against it.
Sorry, I thought you said Brent Franklin, which is, of course, Ben Franklin's douchey brother.
Yeah.
He was Bran?
He was super douchey, but weirdly progressive about slavery.
Yeah, it's weird. It's
mostly
hard to
beer
like
bongs
Brent Franklin,
and slavery were his top two issues.
And CrossFit.
He invented the beer bong, of course, famously.
Just like Ben Franklin invented the wet T-shirt. Mm-hmm. True fact. One interesting anecdote in this vein before we move on is that eventually Washington replaced all of the people enslaved at the presidential mansion with indentured Germans. In retrospect, irony. A little bit.
You can't have retrospective irony, right?
I know. You can't.
Can you? Is that? My brain broke.
I just did.
I had a word seizure.
So eventually, he grew to oppose the British taxes, the Intolerable Acts, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, and he was named commander of the Continental Army by the Continental Congress. He secures Boston and then gets the shit kicked out of him in New York. The Americans flee New York. The British occupy it for the rest of the war. And so Washington's basically most famous moment from the war is the Battle of Trenton, crossing of the Delaware to seize a Hessian outpost at dawn, which wasn't necessarily strategically important, but it also speaks to Washington's knowledge that keeping morale up and keeping people believing that they could win the war was almost as important.
Plus, it looked really good in a painting.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know,
he was crossing the Delaware.
dude's
Like, this
doing
is
the
going to
long
look...
con. He knows what's up.
This is going to look
Branding
so
is
good
what
on my
he- his real
Instagram.
skill.
Branding. It's
Branding,
branding, yeah.
No filter. That's the thing about Washington. He provided leadership where leadership was needed. He didn't necessarily have the detail-oriented view that, say, Hamilton had. One other incident after the war is the Newburgh conspiracy, where a bunch of officers who weren't getting paid were talking about leading the army to Philadelphia to convince Congress to pay them. And Washington intervened.
I can't believe the Founding Fathers sanctioned unpaid labor. What a travesty.
This is the first I've heard of this. Historians, have you heard of this? Email me at whiteprivilege. And eventually, after the war, Washington resigned his commission, a theme that will repeat throughout his life.
Yeah, it's like a mic drop.
Yeah, exactly. He presided over the Constitutional Convention, and the office of the presidency was designed specifically for him, because they didn't really trust anyone else to set the precedents. In office, Washington's best quality, again, was his leadership. He trusted his advisors. He countered them when needed, but he often let them use their own brilliancy, especially Hamilton. He established the National Bank, got the U.S. in good credit standing, maintained neutrality in the French Revolution, and put down the Whiskey Rebellion, and is the only president of the United States to lead troops in the field while in office.
While in office. Okay.
That is true. I read that on the internet too.
We all read it. We all read the same Wikipedia.
I did not.
Good for you.
No responsibilities this week.
You ain't got to do shit this week. And then he stepped down. Probably his greatest achievement in office is being like, I'm going to cede power because that's what this system dictates. It should also be mentioned that he fucking hated the job.
Remember, kids, the best thing you can do is quit.
Well, you know, it's good for your country.
Yeah. He retired to Mount Vernon, went back to his simple life, and then one day he went out working, marking trees to be cut down in the snow and the rain and the hail. And then when he went
Sounds
home...
like he just needed to get out of that.
A little bit.
I think there was a fight going on.
Right?
Yeah, just
He's like, I'm marking trees. I'm sick of this shit. I'll be back at supper.
I'll be out in my man cave, which in the 1730s
Was the woods.
80s was the woods. Yeah.
A literal cave.
Yeah, that's where the woods was where the devil lived, though.
Yeah.
So he's out there, and then he just spent the rest of the day in his wet clothes, which is
What is with the Founding Fathers and wet clothing?
I don't know. I think they only had one outfit, to be fair.
Okay. Like a cartoon character?
And nudity was a sin. So
Right.
Sure.
So he falls ill. He has 3 doctors come to visit him. And George Washington, it should be said, is a huge fan of bloodletting.
Who isn't? Come on.
Exactly.
At least once a month for me. Hey-o. Hey-o.
Voluntary bloodletting, I should say.
Yeah. We have complete control over that, guys. I don't know if you know that or not, but we get to choose the time and the place.
That's an official lady secret.
Wow.
Yeah.
Timmi Lasley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Cody Spiker gave us one too when she was here. Did she not?
Yeah, she did.
Oh, a lady secret?
We cannot speak it, for our lips do not remember.
Something about being able to see the future.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, Cody Spiker. So he had 3 different doctors drain over half of his blood in just a couple hours, and then he totally died. Historians don't know why, but it's probably the blood thing.
Yeah.
One of the doctors recommended doing a tracheotomy, but the other 2 doctors overruled him because they thought it was too dangerous.
A
Which
tracheotomy. What would that have done for him?
they thought his epiglottis was swollen, so that would have removed the blockage in his throat, which probably would have saved his life if they didn't drain half of his fucking blood. So,
Right.
but that would have been too dangerous. And then Martha Washington burned all but 5 of their love letters, presumably to keep the sexy bits away from the public.
Yeah.
And that's...
I read a pretty salacious letter he wrote to Sally Fairfax before he met Martha. It was pretty, like, I blushed a little bit. I was a little blushy for sure. I'd read it to you, but I don't have Wi-Fi here, so
Explicit. Yeah.
yeah. Plus
Explicit content.
Yeah, we have to
It was
keep
pretty
that.
racy, so I mean, that's just like
Our
him being
iTunes
like,
rating
"Hey,
is
I
at
like
stake
you."
here.
Just Google
He
George
admired
Washington sex and you'll find something, I'm sure.
Yeah, image search it.
Really wish I had Wi-Fi here. What's your password? Let's get it.
Oh, God. Oh, yeah, I'll give my Wi-Fi password on air.
Perfect.
That's the actual history of George Washington. Timmy, if you want to
Well,
go ahead.
I mean, okay, so this isn't so much an alternate as additional information that not everybody has that will change the filter through which you see George Washington. Okay, so the wooden teeth thing, let's start there.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's okay with you guys, gonna
That's-
start there.
I object.
The wooden teeth, that's not true. It's not true. He didn't have wooden teeth. It was actually human teeth and ceramics that they used. They were never wooden, but it was ceramics and like real human teeth. And he got the teeth from his slaves at the time. He actually paid his slaves for their teeth. And at the time, people were like, "Oh my
really
God."
also countermanding that teeth are racist things.
Yeah.
But people were like, "Oh my God, like you paid your slaves for their teeth? That's like, whoa, what a good guy you are. You paid them for it.
Paid them.
You could have just taken them shits." But no, he paid for them.
Truly, he was very noble.
But here's the thing, like when you
Washington
do that
crest.
sort of thing, it's
The
really
motto, always pay for your teeth.
always. Yeah, never take a tooth you find on the ground. Make sure you're paying someone for it.
Yeah.
Even the tooth fairy knows that, you know? He was basically the tooth fairy.
Basically,
That's where the legend of the tooth fairy comes from,
The
is
horror
George
movie version
Washington.
of the tooth
Yeah, the idea of like a grown man sneaking into your room at night to pay you for
And
your
then you see
teeth
a
was too
6 foot
much.
tall white dude sitting on your bed with
It was
your
too
teeth in
scary,
his
so
mouth.
they
yeah,
made it a
tall,
fairy.
smallpox scarred, toothless white man who comes into your room
George
at night.
Washington.
Basically Candyman.
That's what I'm going to tell my children. The truth. The truth. No, okay, so
Candyman,
that's,
ironically, a dead slave in that movie.
so that's the that's where the myth of the tooth fairy comes from, is George Washington's payment of his slaves for their teeth. But
And
the
then
thing
he
is,
takes dollar bills gives people dollar bills because he can't stand his own toothless image.
okay, so what people don't really think about a lot of times is what a slippery slope that kind of thing can be.
sure
You know,
trading
like,
in human
it kind of, well, you know,
Buying
it's like
teeth is the
like
gateway drug.
It's like a weird form of borrowing, you know, like
It's
you
a
know,
very weird form of
you know,
borrowing.
it's a slippery slope, you know. You start out borrowing a cup of sugar, then before you know it, it's a pack of smokes. After
hope-
that, it's like you're sleeping with the guy's wife, and you're like, "How did I get here?" It feels great, but it also
seriously-
feels bad.
Seriously hope this story ends with, like, Button Gwinnett in a tub full of ice with a scar over his
Well, okay,
kidney.
so it started there with the teeth, but it didn't stop.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
the same thing with like that scenario, cup of sugar to adultery, like
Yeah.
same sort of thing happened
Clear path.
for George Washington, you know, like he started borrowing and he's like, I could be better. I could be better. I could be better. He was always trying to like improve his status in life. Like there was a huge drive throughout his presidency even to like always look the part and to seem the part and to be legit. And in order to accomplish that, he really had to start taking other body parts from other people.
Of
Yeah,
course.
I mean,
You know, so
man, you could just, in retrospect, you could see each next step coming.
right? Like
It's-
he
the-
slowly morphed himself into our first chimera, you know, the first of many chimera presidents that we've had.
Right,
but like
right.
he's really set
A proud
the precedent,
tradition of the presidency be a chimera.
right? You know, like he set so many precedents, very impressive precedents throughout
It's like,
his.
can I have
his-
a beer with him? Is he assembled of multiple parts?
Right, and you know, you need that. Like we, as a nation, we are a nation of so many people. We need so many people in the highest office.
E pluribus unum. It just makes sense.
Okay, so So that's where it started. But the very next step, one of the things that Washington is famous for is not wearing a wig. Like, he didn't wear a wig. That was his real hair, and he powdered it. It was his real hair, or so we thought. But see, what happened is Washington was actually completely bald. And his brother Lawrence, this is going to blow your mind, you guys. His brother Lawrence never died. He never died. He overcame tuberculosis just like Georgie overcame smallpox. He never died. And here's the other thing, guys. They were both 3 feet tall. You see where I'm going?
God.
You see what's happening
I see
here?
where this is going.
See what's happening?
I'm very excited for the next sentence.
Lawrence faked his own death, you guys, so that he could stand on top of George's shoulders for the rest of their life. It is hardy stock. Wow. Do you know how much shoulder strength you have to have? He was carrying a nation on his shoulders. He was carrying his brother on his shoulders, all right? Like those smallpox scars. Just boyhood tussles with his kid brother Georgie.
Have you ever tried to shoot at 2 children in a long coat?
That is,
you're just going to get bullet holes in the coat.
I was going to say, I've never seen a picture of George Washington without wearing a really big coat.
And there's a reason for that. And you said, and it was like you were in my head. Why didn't he take his
clothes off after marking those trees? Maybe he had a terrible secret?
Right? You guys
Why
are
did
catching
he never
on.
have children of his own? Never took his clothes off. Because another freak brother.
Well, I mean, he did have smallpox and he couldn't get it up.
Yeah, Dick don't work.
Right? Come on. But when you said half king, it's like, why did the half king love the half king? They knew they were all right. Maybe that doesn't quite work together. But you get what I'm saying here. So, yeah. I mean, the whole switch over calendar thing, like what were the dates?
11 and the 22nd.
Those were actually both of their separate birthdays, and they lobbied to get the calendar switched so that they could both kind of have their birthdays still.
Sure. If you're doing a birthday 11 days apart, it's just a fucking drag. Also.
Right. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to celebrate together and have it all make sense. So they pushed real hard to get the calendar switched over so that it just seemed more legitimate, just a little more legitimate. It's known that he wrote 20,000 letters in his life. 20,000 letters. He was you need at least 2 hands writing for that. Like, there's no way.
Times. Sure. Yeah,
this is all just going to be proof of what I'm telling you here. Like, this is like, you think it's just a made up joke or something, but like, I've got hard evidence.
I've seen this video on your YouTube channel where you also talk about a flat earth.
www.believemethisaffectsallofus.com. Love you, Michael Carter. Okay, so he was made an honorary citizen of France in 1792. And it was because at that time, the French knew what was going on. The brothers borrowing body parts from people. Cause like Lawrence was into it too. He's like, cool teeth. Sure. I get cool teeth. Man, you gotta get a working dick. They looked their whole lives for a working dick. Never found one. But like,
super hard to find.
Working dick was in short supply in the 18th century.
Not like all the working dick we got today.
Oh.
Just hard working dick.
I mean, today we just have we should really put a bunch of working dicks in a grain silo for a future drought. Instead, we're just sending pictures of them to people on Tinder.
I know. What good is a picture? It's worth 1,000 words, but words don't do shit for me, Not downstairs. You know what I'm saying?
Words ain't dicks.
Okay, so they aren't dicks. You can't stick them in you. So the brothers are going around, they're borrowing body parts. They're like, we're not a very good dancer. We're going to need to be a good dancer at, all these official parties and stuff. They find a Frenchman, real light on his feet, They borrow that. And by 1792, they had actually borrowed so many French parts, that France was like, we're going to make him an honorary citizen. We know what's going on.
He's 50% French at this
We're going to have to make him an honorary citizen because, you got to remember in the time, the historical context, France was just looking to get a foothold in the Americas again, like just finding a way to stake a claim any way they could to the continent, So
that's why the French flag briefly featured George Washington's dick.
So he got to be an honorary citizen of France, which is a pretty cool thing for the first president of the United States. And I think it's sad that more countries haven't adopted our presidents.
As their presidents?
Right. You know,
I mean, it's really sad that we don't control more of the world.
well, you know, American imperialism is really what the American dream is all about. It's like the highest working order of the American dream is imperialism itself. You know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps so that you can set those bootstraps on the face of someone else.
Right?
So you can have someone else manufacture your bootstraps for
Right?
you.
It's like, I can't be making bootstraps. I'm busy ruling.
Exactly. I have a communications degree to use.
There's a new Netflix original series. I don't have time for bootstrap.
Oh,
making.
man, have you seen Kimmy Schmidt? Come on. Sherlock has new episodes. So
Oh, really?
much to do.
Oh.
I know, right? They've got
British,
some
though.
making up. Okay, I'm digressing. We're talking about the real history of George Washington's, both of them, Lawrence and George.
Okay. I thought you were saying, I thought you were making some sort of pun.
No.
Like George
they were-
Washington, tons of fun.
They were they were plural. The brothers Washington.
There we go. The
So-
inspiration for
Okay, but
Karamazov.
think about it this way. He was one of our sickest presidents, and he didn't die of pretty much any of that shit, except for the
last one.
epiglottitis, which I honestly, when I read it, I didn't know that it was like I thought it was just like George the Lower had basically
Bottom
been
George.
Yeah, Bottom George has gotten kicked in the throat so many times throughout the years.
I mean, that's
Maybe
one of the hazards
that's
of
what it
being
was.
bottom George.
Right?
We established that bottom George is George and top George is Lawrence, or is it the other way around?
Lawrence is on top for sure.
Okay.
But I mean, really,
He is.
eventually, top Lawrence becomes top George.
Right.
Who remembers
okay.
Lawrence Washington?
Right. Well, Lawrence had died. He had faked his own death,
Exactly.
and it was important for him to have the cool hair.
And
you
only
know?
3 names existed at the time, so George might as well
Right.
take it.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, he had diphtheria, tuberculosis, smallpox, dysentery, malaria, tonsillitis, carbuncle, whatever that was.
Wait, what was
it's
that
like
one?
carbuncle?
It's like backgammon.
Carbonol. I can't even read my own handwriting. And pneumonia. But like that is so many diseases. And this was in a time before there was even like antibiotics or, you know, that is amazing that he would live through all that. And the only way that it actually could have happened is if it had been 2 separate people dealing with like half of those. Maybe you could survive half of those diseases. There's no way that one person could survive.
But split
All of
between 2
them.
immune systems.
Yeah, more if you steal one.
Yeah,
Exactly. You steal some bone marrow from someone. You suck the marrow from your enemies. You know, the old
Delicious.
town destroyer. That's what he's
First
doing.
of all, spread some of your enemy's marrow on some toast points.
I hear
Hey,
it's pretty
sneak
good.
into a Hessian base in the middle of the night. That's like a buffet.
It's
Yeah.
delicious.
I mean, he took all of the best parts of all the best people of his day and really integrated them and literally integrated themselves into himself. And,
Really, the
and
body
made-
of a nation.
Right, exactly. At his death, you know, Congress found out what was going on. Like he couldn't hide the
Did they
secret
both,
anymore.
Did they both die at the
Yeah,
same?
they did. By that point, they had become pretty fused together.
Oh, so they, during this weird illicit surgery, they literally sewed each other to each other?
Well, you know, I think the history is unclear on that.
Okay.
Whether they just kind of grew into each other the way that like a tree
wedding
would
ring, like
grow
you'll
around
put
a
skin
fence
over your
or
wedding
yeah.
ring after a
Jesus.
while.
Does that happen?
That definitely happens.
As long as you
Only
don't
in
take
very
it off,
loving
am I right?
relationships.
Yeah.
So yeah, the history is a little unclear on that. I wasn't able to find much research on that, but all the crazy websites that I read, this is you know they do state that the 2 brothers, the George Lawrence Washington, they discovered both of them dead, you know that night and.
And it would suck to be dragging around your dead brother between your legs for, 6 months or whatever?
George the Lower had been for years. Am I right? Oh, dead dick joke. So what Congress did when they realized this, and this is why, and true fact, no one can ever have a higher military office than George Washington. At the time of his death, he was lieutenant general.
Sure.
And when they found out that there were 2 separate Washingtons, having been George Washington the whole time. They were like, how do we honor these men's contribution to our nation, without looking like a bunch of idiots for not noticing how weird that was, So they decided to give him the highest decoration in the military that you could possibly have, which is General of the Armies of the U.S. And no one will ever reach that. He is the highest ranking officer of any U.S. military, and it's because there were two of him. They were two of them. And they were like, he kind of wins.
That's also why Congress passed the law that all presidents have to get naked before taking the oath of office, just to check that they're not two people standing on each other's shoulders.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Little Rascals Amendment is what it's called.
Yeah,
Just
publicly
in front of the
on
Chief
TV.
Justice.
Right.
Oh, I thought it was like part of the ceremony on television.
So yeah, I mean, the brothers, they wandered through the countryside surveying things because that was the thing they liked to do. They were big surveyors. George the upper was good at math, so they made that work. Stealing body parts from other people, just making the greatest president this nation has ever seen.
Until Lincoln, at least.
Well, he was 3 people stacked on top of each other from what I
that
heard.
remains to be seen.
But,
I mean, that is a rumor.
there was one under the hat, too.
of course. Space Lincoln under the hat. I'm trying to think of the name of the alien from Flintstones.
There was an alien in Flintstones?
Gazoo, the Great Gazoo.
Great Kazoo.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he granted, I think,
Oh,
Fred's
I
wishes.
do remember that.
And he called him...
Timmy, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Zach, you are serving as judge for this episode.
Yeah, I mean, you know what I kind of like about George Washington stealing body parts to become sort of a Gollum figure, a 2-person Gollum sort of.
He had to do, in his defense, he had to do what he had to do for the nation.
Sure, absolutely. But it gives him something in common, I think, with another great leader, Mr. Julius Caesar, who of course also loved feasting on human body parts.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jose McCall, historian, PhD, I believe, established that
enlightened us to
in episode 4.
His penchant for cannibalism. And I think maybe that is a common recurring thing. It makes sense to me. The great leaders maybe gain their greatness from the flesh of others being integrated into their body.
And you don't necessarily have to eat it and pass it out. You could
it's more
honor
sophisticated.
it.
In 1700, it was more sophisticated than it was.
It's
in
a more
ancient Greece.
spiritual
Right.
power.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah,
It's the quickening.
I think I will toss. And also, I'm a sucker for any story that involves 2 children in a coat
Yeah, me too.
doing things adults should be doing. So not like going to movies that are rated
Consensually,
R.
right?
Yes.
Consensually doing things.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a little more innocently, like they bought like a bunch of beer and got drunk, like that Summer of the Monkeys.
How is
Get out
that?
a business
I don't know
loan.
that that's really that innocent, but okay.
So I'm gonna go for the alternate history this time.
I understand.
think.
I appreciate that, but honestly, Brian, I think both of us have won because my history does not
It colors.
take away from your truth at all, which is, I think, the best kind of truth.
Thank you for validating my truth.
You're welcome.
Your truth is
That's what podcasts are
is
about.
the best. Exactly.
Right?
Self-validation.
Just validating our truths.
I see my voice on a screen and I feel better about myself.
I do exist.
Now, listeners, we've been allowing you to vote in previous episodes, but I think for right now,
In the spirit of talking about America,
about America, we're going to
We'll
let the
decide
powerful
for
decide.
They are your super delegates. We've got one super delegate. He's the only one who gets a vote.
yeah,
And he's Zach.
great.
We're going to find ways for listeners to participate in the episode, other than voting. But for right now, until we get a larger voting base, we're going to stick to the judge deciding.
Oh my God, you guys had 2 kids in a coat voting on this, didn't you? Didn't you?
I don't know about the
Can
coach,
neither confirm or deny.
but if you want to ask
It's the only
us,
way they could. The limit was age 18, so they had to stand on top of
We
each
add
other
our
in a coat.
ages together.
Yeah, to fool us.
I don't know that that's how, because you don't have like 2 9-year-olds and they can't vote still. Maybe. If you want to leave us a comment or ask us a question or suggest a topic for a future episode, you can go to revisionistpodcast.com, like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter, or review us on iTunes, which is very helpful. Again, we've gotten so many incredibly generous reviews. So thank you for doing that. Before we go, Timmy, you do so much incredible stuff all over town. You host Epilogue Comedy the last Saturday of every month at Mutiny.
You got it. They're getting a new stage. It should be in.
Oh, really?
There's going to be a stage at the back of the bookstore instead of just being up by the window cramming the coffee bar. We're going to have an actual stage. I'm very excited about that.
And that's at Mutiny Information Cafe at First and Broadway?
Ellsworth and Broadway.
Ellsworth. I can
10
never
p.m.
remember the cross streets.
Last Saturday of every month.
You also do a lot of stuff at El Chorrito's Comedy Room.
Yeah, I do the booking there. And so believe me when I say every show is amazing. Even if I'm not on it or directly involved, I pick the best and people bring me the best because it's the best room and everybody loves it.
And the showcases there all have like really interesting different ideas too.
A lot of them. Some of them are like Christy Buckley runs a great show, a fantastic thing for the scene called Power Middle. That's this Friday.
And the best name of
Power
any
Middle.
comedy show.
But it's about like where else does a young comic get to do a feature set? Where do they get to work on their 20-minute sets? Sure, yeah, you can put like 2 7-minute sets together, 3 7-minute sets together, edit a little, you got 20, but that's not really how it works.
Right.
In the real world. So being able to practice that much, it's a brilliant idea. She's brilliant and wonderful.
Yeah.
Power Middle. Nerd Roast is there. That's like a theme, but Power Middle is just straight stand up.
Yeah. But that's Comedy Room is great. And then this episode's coming out on Saturday. So if you're quick on the draw, this Sunday, you can go down to Arguments and Grievances at Vine Street Pub. Another amazing show. There's a lot of shit to check out, but yeah, so.
Go see a show. Go see a show.
Go
Any
see any show.
Even
Most
if I'm not
shows.
there. I mean, the show will probably be pretty good if I am there, because I don't do shit. Like this podcast made the cut. Congrats, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, just go see live stuff.
Zach, you co-host Stage of Fools podcast, and you just had your wrap-up episode.
That's correct. So hiatus for a while.
Ooh.
Yep. But there's still back episodes available.
Yeah. No, we're not taking them down suddenly and permanently for no apparent reason. No.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
Which is, again, as we said before, a discussion of Ease the Royals.
Yeah, a terrible show.
Which is the show that involved the driver giving a blowjob in a roadhead situation.
Correct.
Wow, so reckless.
Oh,
Yeah.
As for me, you can catch me wherever. Follow me on Facebook or Twitter, whatever. I think that should do it for this episode, though. Timmy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was super fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad we got to the bottom of all this.
Exactly. And we can finally move on as a nation.
Yeah.
Zach, thank you as always.
Really, we should add a second face on a Mount Rushmore. George's face.
Slightly lower.
Just underneath
Just
him.
underneath,
I
yeah.
would like that. I
His
think
weird
that would be-
smallpoxy face.
You know, they
that would
say
be
it was never
important.
completely finished, and I'll bet that's what they were going to get to next.
You should see what they're planning for what Crazy Horse is actually riding. It's not a horse. Spoiler alert.
Wait, it's a sweet dirt bike.
It's 2 children in a horse costume.
For everyone here at The Revisionist, I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
Have a good night.